Imagine you're swimming in the ocean right now and something grabs you. Not a shark, not a squid. Something with circular jaws that work like a pineapple core. Compound eyes the size of dinner plates. Appendages covered in spines that look like they were designed by someone who really hated the concept of mercy. This thing is 3 feet long, moves faster than you can swim, and has literally no predators because nothing else on Earth has figured out how to kill it yet. Here's the thing, this isn't some deep-sea horror movie creature. For 25 million years, the oceans were ruled by animals so nightmarish that when scientists first found their fossils, they couldn't even figure out what body parts they were looking at. They just kept finding pieces and going, well, that's deeply unsettling, but I have no idea what it is. And if these things hadn't been wiped out when they were, the entire trajectory of complex life on Earth would have gone a completely different direction. We might not have had backbones. We might not have had jaws. We might not have even existed at all. Welcome to the Cambrian period, when Earth's oceans were dominated by nature's worst mistake. We are going back 500 million years, and I need you to understand something right up front. If you jumped into the ocean back then, you would immediately want to jump back out, but you wouldn't be able to, because you'd already be dead. The water was warm. Not tropical vacation warm, but bathtub that's been sitting too long warm. Depending on where you were, it might be green, brown, or this weird murky gray that suggested nothing good was happening down there. The sunlight barely penetrated more than a few feet in most places because the water was thick with microscopic life and sediment. There were no fish. None. No coral reefs, no seaweed forests, no dolphins, no whales, no sea turtles. Nothing you could point at and go, oh, I know what that is. The Cambrian seafloor was mostly just mud, punctuated by weird mounds of bacterial goo and bizarre sponge-looking things that may or may not have been alive in any way you'd recognize. And it was loud down there. The constant clicking and scraping of millions of hard-shelled things crawling over each other. Trilobites by the millions, scuttling across the seafloor like some kind of prehistoric cockroach convention. Life had just figured out how to make hard body parts about 40 million years earlier, and everything was trying out different designs. Creatures that were just tubes with tentacles, creatures that were just mouths on stalks, creatures that seemed to be mostly spikes with a small angry animal attached. But here's what would really freak you out. Everything was small, and everything was on the bottom. You'd look out into the murky water and see nothing. Just empty water with occasional shadows moving through it. The open water was basically a desert. Everything that could would hug the seafloor, bury itself in sediment, or hide in whatever crevices it could find. This was because something was hunting up there in that empty water. Something that had figured out a terrifying new trick: speed. The ocean had this oppressive quality where you knew something was wrong but couldn't quite see what. Like walking through a parking garage late at night, except the parking garage is the entire ocean and it's always late at night and the thing that lives there can see you perfectly. And then you'd see them, moving through the water like nothing else could. Not scuttling, not crawling, not slowly drifting, actually swimming, fast, purposeful, coming straight toward whatever poor armored creature had made the mistake of being visible. The apex predator of the Cambrian wasn't hiding, it was hunting. And it was very, very good at it. Meet Anomalocaris. Yes, that's its real name. It means abnormal shrimp, which tells you everything about how confused scientists were when they found it. It's something so weird that scientists spent 100 years finding pieces of it and describing each piece as a completely different animal. They found the mouth first and thought it was a jellyfish. Then they found the feeding appendages and decided those were shrimp bodies. The main body showed up and they called it a sea cucumber. For decades, museums had 3 separate animals on display that were actually all parts of the same nightmare creature. It wasn't until 1985 that someone finally looked at all the fossils together and went, oh no, it's all one thing. And that thing is deeply upsetting. Anomalocaris was up to 3 feet long in some species. That might not sound huge until you remember that nothing else in the ocean at this time was bigger than your thumb. It was like if every other animal at the dog park was a hamster and then a wolf showed up. Let me describe this thing properly because you need to understand how alien it was. Its head had 2 huge compound eyes, each one made up of 16,000 lenses. These weren't just big eyes, they were the most advanced eyes that had ever existed up to that point. It could see you coming from any angle. It could track movement in low light. it could probably see better than you can right now. Below the eyes are two long appendages covered in spines. Not arms, not claws, not tentacles. Just these segmented, spine-covered grabbing things that could reach out, wrap around prey, and pull it toward the mouth. The spines pointed inward. Once they grabbed you, you weren't getting away. And that mouth. It was a ring of overlapping plates that could contract inward like a camera shutter made of knives. It would close around prey and just compress, crushing shells, grinding through armor, reducing other animals to paste. Scientists have found trilobite fossils with bite marks that match Anomalocaris mouths perfectly. Circular chunks just scooped out of their shells. The body was segmented with swimming lobes running down each side. These lobes undulated in waves, pushing water and creating thrust. It moved like a manta ray, smooth and fast, but with way more nightmare fuel. Fossils have been found in China, Canada, Australia, Utah, and Nevada. Anywhere there was ocean in the Cambrian, there was probably Anomalocaris. The fossil record suggests they were everywhere, all the time. Here's how Anomalocaris broke the game. It figured out that the open water was empty real estate, and the first animal to actually live there would be unstoppable. Every other creature in the Cambrian was stuck on the sea floor, crawling around in the mud competing for space and food. But Anomalocaris could swim. Not just drift or float, but actually propel itself with speed and maneuverability. It had unlocked three-dimensional movement while everyone else was still figuring out left and right. It could patrol above the sea floor, scanning with those massive compound eyes, and spot any trilobite or soft-bodied creature that made the mistake of being visible. Then it would dive down, grab the prey with those spined appendages, and haul it up into the water column where the victim couldn't escape. The Cambrian oceans were absolutely packed with food. Trilobites everywhere, soft-bodied worms everywhere. It was an all-you-can-eat buffet, and Anomalocaris had the only invitation. But Anomalocaris wasn't just eating everything in sight. It was accidentally building the foundations for modern ocean ecosystems. Before Anomalocaris, there was no real reason for prey animals to develop speed. But once you had a fast-swimming predator that could come from above, suddenly speed mattered. A lot. The evolutionary pressure was immediate and intense. Any trilobite that could move just a little bit faster had a massive survival advantage. Any worm that could burrow just a little bit deeper lived longer. Anomalocaris was essentially running a 25 million year long natural selection experiment on every other animal in the ocean. The trilobites got particularly creative. Some developed spines sticking out at weird angles to make themselves harder to grab. Others developed the ability to roll up into a ball like an armored pillbug. All of this innovation happened because Anomalocaris was eating their relatives. The fossil record shows an explosion of burrows, tunnels, and hidey holes dug into the sea floor. Before Anomalocaris, shallow burrows were good enough. After Anomalocaris, prey species were digging deeper and more complex networks. Some of these burrows show multiple entrances and escape tunnels. That's not instinct, that's fear. Around 480 million years ago, something changed. The Cambrian was ending, and the oceans were about to become significantly more dangerous for everyone, including Anomalocaris. The first problem was competition. Real competition. Early nautiloids appeared, those spiral-shelled ancestors of modern squid and octopuses. These things had jet propulsion, tentacles, and could grow even larger than Anomalocaris. They could move faster in open water, strike from greater distances, and they were smart. Actually intelligent in ways Anomalocaris probably wasn't. Then came the early fish. Not the fish we know today, but their heavily armored ancestors called ostracoderms. Most were small, but they had something Anomalocaris didn't. Actual bones. An internal skeleton that could support larger body sizes and more complex muscle arrangements. The engineering behind fish bodies was just better. These fish were developing jaws, too. Real, hinged jaws with teeth. Anomalocaris had a crushing mouth that worked from all sides, but a jaw works like a lever and can generate way more force with way less effort. A jaw was simply a superior tool for predation. The seafloor was more complex now with more reef-building organisms, more places to hide, more three-dimensional structure. The flat, open seafloor that Anomalocaris had patrolled for millions of years was disappearing. But the real killer was specialization. Anomalocaris was a generalist predator. It ate whatever it could catch. That worked great when it was the only option, but now the ocean had specialists. Predators that evolved specifically to hunt trilobites, or soft-bodied prey, or mollusks. Each specialist was better at its specific job than Anomalocaris was at anything. The fossil record tells the story pretty clearly. Anomalocaris fossils become less common after 480 million years ago. The species diversity drops. The geographic range shrinks. They were losing ground everywhere. Some lineages tried to adapt. There are late Cambrian and early Ordovician species that show modifications. Different mouth structures, altered feeding appendages, changes in body size. They were trying, but evolution doesn't work fast enough when the entire ocean is changing around you. By 450 million years ago, Anomalocaris and its relatives were effectively gone. Not extinct immediately, but reduced to rare, marginal populations in places where the new predators hadn't fully taken over. And within a few million years after that, they disappeared entirely from the fossil record. The ocean they had ruled for 25 million years didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to animals with jaws, with internal skeletons, with complex brains. The age of the weird Cambrian monsters was over. Game over, no continue. Evolution had moved on. Here's the thing though, Anomalocaris losing was the best thing that ever happened to us. If Anomalocaris had remained the dominant predator strategy, oceans might still look fundamentally Cambrian. Slow-crawling things on the bottom, weird spineless hunters in the water column, nothing particularly complex. But Anomalocaris failed, and that failure created space for fish. Fish with jaws. Fish with spines that would eventually become the first vertebrates to crawl onto land. Without the evolutionary pressure to escape Anomalocaris, trilobites might never have developed the defensive innovations that later species built upon. The entire trajectory of marine life was shaped by 25 million years of desperately trying not to get eaten by a creature with a circular mouth. That transition from Anomalocaris-dominated oceans to fish-dominated oceans was the transition that made us possible. Fish evolved into amphibians. Amphibians evolved into reptiles. One branch of reptiles evolved into mammals, and eventually, us. Every step in that chain required fish to exist first. And fish only got their chance because Anomalocaris went extinct. We carry the legacy of that extinction in our bodies. Your jaw, that hinged structure that can bite and chew, that evolved to compete with what came after Anomalocaris. Your spine, that internal skeleton, that was the engineering solution that finally outperformed the body plan Anomalocaris used. The modern ocean is the direct descendant of Anomalocaris' world. Every apex predator today, sharks, orcas, giant squid, is playing the same game Anomalocaris invented. Be fast, be efficient, hunt in open water, crush your prey. The strategy worked so well that it's still the template 500 million years later. We just swapped out the hardware. But here's what keeps me up at night. Anomalocaris ruled for 25 million years. Humans have been around for maybe 300,000 years. We've been the dominant species on Earth for maybe 10,000 years if we're being generous. And Anomalocaris was perfectly adapted to its environment. It had no natural predators. It was the most advanced hunter in existence. And it's still lost because the world changed. So what happens when our world changes? Climate shifts, new competition, environmental chemistry changes, loss of food sources. Evolution didn't care that Anomalocaris had held the throne for 25 million years. It just cared that fish were better at the current game. One day, Earth might decide it doesn't care that humans built civilizations and went to the moon. Something else will just be better suited for whatever comes next. We exist because nature's worst predator failed. And someday, something will exist because we failed too. That's not pessimism, that's just evolution. Nothing stays on top forever. That's all for now, folks. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this has been Proto-Earth.